Welcome to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show, where we discuss all things political, bringing you the top stories locally, nationally, and from around the world. I'm Ruben Abati, and Thisdaylive begins now. I'd like to welcome today's panelist, Professor Bola Akintenrewa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Chike Ogia, former Commissioner of Information, Delta State, and Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Now, let's take our first story. Nigeria has become the latest victim of the coronavirus as health officials confirmed the first case of the global epidemic in sub-Saharan Africa. The case is that of an Italian citizen who works in Lagos and who returned from Milan. Earlier this week, authorities say that the patient is clinically stable with no serious symptoms and is being managed at the Infectious Diseases Hospital in Yaba, Lagos. The low number of cases across Africa, which has close economic links with China, the epicenter of the deadly outbreak, has puzzled health specialists. Prior to the case in Nigeria, there have been just 2 cases across the continent, in Egypt and Nigeria. Nigeria's health minister, Osage Anire, spoke to the press on how this happened and the prevention methods that have been taken to ensure this does not result into an outbreak.
The case was confirmed on the 27th of February 2020 and is the first to be reported in Nigeria since the beginning of the outbreak in China in January 2020. It is an Italian citizen who works in Nigeria and returned from Milan, Italy to Lagos, Nigeria on the 25th of February 2020. He actually landed here in the evening of the 24th. But by the time he got into his residence, Lagos, already 25th. He was confirmed by the virology laboratory of the Lagos University Teaching Hospital, which is a part of the laboratory network of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control. The patient is clinically stable with no serious symptoms and is being managed at the Infectious Disease Hospital in Yaba, Lagos.
Well, coronavirus, now finally in Nigeria. The gentleman has already been isolated at the Infectious Diseases Hospital in Lagos, right? But globally, we are aware that there are over 80,000 cases, over 2,000 persons have died. Italy is one of the worst hit countries, with about 971 cases, apart from China, which had most of the cases, the epicenter being in Wuhan. Now, Nigeria has its own very first case. We're hoping, the authorities are also hoping, that the gentleman will survive. But now, we're right there, Africa's most populous country. Are we prepared? Are we serious in terms of handling the case? Should Nigerians panic? Many Nigerians are already panicking. I start with you.
Sincerely speaking, if you look at the statistics of the pandemic, it tells us that it is the least, virulent of such viruses, even when you compare it to Ebola and even
the basic flu.
Even the basic flu, exactly. I think less than 2% or whatever, So, what I think that is important, and I think that is what we are doing very well right now, which is, like you rightly said, though at great cost, because I believe the death of Dr. Adadevoh was, something that was irreparable. Nobody should ever think that was not a major cost to that fight. But yes, we had a dress rehearsal with Ebola at that time.
In 2014.
That's right, and that's why we are not caught napping. And then the new commissioner in Lagos, whether we like it or not, Lagos is a major gateway into Nigeria. And I can assure you, if we are going to have an issue with this thing, 80% is going to be from that Lagos airport and all of that. The new commissioner for health, he was my senior in school, by the way, in secondary school. And he's
Professor Akinbayomi.
That's right. And he's been all over the world. You know, he's seasoned professor. He's done all of this. And you can see his hands are right there on the pulse. So to that extent, that inspires a lot of confidence. What I just think Nigeria should do is that we should build more capacity, put more of the infrastructure in place, put more information out so that the protocols can be understood. You know, in Nigeria, we make jest of everything. And I've seen some WhatsApp posts talking about different kinds of funny things about the virus. I don't think this is anything to be funny about. We should focus on it. We should deal with it. All the other ancillary airports. Because you see, once someone starts moving and every contact he makes becomes an issue. So you land in Lagos and then you get on a flight or you go in a bus to Asaba or to Benin or to Owerri. Everybody that has met you along the way becomes a subject. And, you know, so it's a very technical thing. It's not something we can joke with at all. You know, I remember when the thing first, when the Italian first came, there was that fake news that went out that he went to some CIPAM office in Banana Island, which was a lie.
Oh, that he went to Ogun State, some place in Ewekoro.
Yeah, that's where he went to. Apparently, that's the truth. That's where he went to. And that is why the Ogun State government has been working with the Lagos State government in tracing all the contacts and everybody he's met. You know, so I think...
but Yemi, what's your own take on this matter? Do you think that the response looks like it's serious, effective, and, you know, deliberate?
I think so. I mean, I think we probably underestimated because, I mean, as I was just checking the commissioner's Twitter feed, he's having a briefing. He started having a briefing about two hours ago with Lagos State on where they are. But the facilities just started being renovated in January. So we started renovating in response to the virus, not that we kept the capacity post-Ebola. So we spent a lot of money after Ebola. We had facilities at that time, but of course we didn't have any major issues. So in typical fashion, we let it go into a state of disrepair. This now comes up, and then in January we start putting pieces together. I mean, there was a story that Punch carried yesterday that the index case with the facilities where he was in was uncomfortable, blah, blah. He was eventually moved, even though the commissioner said it was fake news, but he then reported himself that the gentleman was moved. So I think maybe the way Punch presented it was a bit extreme in their view, but the point of it was that the facilities were not as reported as we are ready in that sense. We can, but we're not at our optimal state. But I think for me, more importantly, is misinformation. I mean, one of the ones over last week was the supposed driver of the Uber who took saying, I haven't been in Lagos in 2 years. I'm not the person, there's no such story. Now, what's important for Nigerians particularly, and I guess really applies across the world, is in terms of how we share information. And in quite a number of my WhatsApp groups, I kept saying, don't share or forward information if it's not sourced. You have a lot of these
If you are not sure.
If it's, even if it's, starting point, if it's not sourced, if you are saying it's either you got it from WHO or CNN or in Nigeria, the Federal Ministry of Health or the Commissioner of Health, then there's a person who said it and you have a source for it. Yeah. But you see all these forwards that starts with a master's degree holder in China, and then all this states, master's degree holder has no name, there's no context. But because you forward it, and the part of it is just supposedly trying to help and pass on information that's useful, but without a shadow of a doubt, we do more harm than good. So please be mindful of not sharing information that has no source, just not to add to the
And wash your hands regularly.
Exactly.
With soap or with sanitizer.
Which they've
and
now
if you
turned
have
into
to sneeze, sneeze into
your
a
elbow.
curved elbow.
Yes.
And then if you are sick, stay at home. And if anybody sneezes around you, take to your heels.
No, but to your point, sorry, before Prof, your point about sanitizer, just a quick point. The Consumer Council, I forget the official name, but the Consumer Council issued a statement today that it is actually illegal, and they cited the relevant parts of the law for a lot of retailers now that have jacked up the prices of sanitizers. Yeah. And I mean, the point is, if people cannot afford it, it will come back to hurt you. So it's in your interest to ensure that it is affordable, that everybody who wants to get it.
Yes, indeed. It's not only sanitizers that have gone up in terms of price. Even face masks have become very scarce, very expensive. Prof, you have a face mask, Prof? Or you are still planning to get one? Or you are planning to take them to court? The same way you took
NEPA.
PSN or the discourse to court.
Your question is very interesting. Are we well prepared? I think the answer can be yes, and it can also be no. It depends on what we are interested in. First of all, are we prepared in terms of long term? I think we are not. In the immediate, we are simply reacting. And at that particular level, you may be saying, well, strenuous efforts are being made. But you cannot even define being well prepared on the basis of making strenuous efforts for two reasons. The first reason is that according to reports, scientific reports, there are only 2 laboratories in Africa which do have the required reagents, either for making the required vaccines or to respond to things like this. Last week, Nigeria, Madagascar, and a host of others now indicate that they are part, that they are ready, that they can test. The 2 laboratories officially and universally recognized are those in Senegal, Institut Pasteur, and the one in South Africa. Now, these are laboratories that are already well equipped for all these reagents. Now, if Nigeria now says that it is prepared, as at last week, fine enough. But I think that being well prepared means anticipating, not just reacting on the basis of this type of incidents. The second point of observation is this.
Well, Prof, before you make that second observation, we'll take a short break. When we return, the conversation will continue. Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, I have Professor Bola Akinterenwa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Chike Ogea, former Commissioner of Information, Delta State, and Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Now, before we went on break, we were talking about coronavirus, COVID-19. We're still on the same subject. So, Prof, I'm going to start with you because we're going to make a second point. But let's look at the economic aspect of it, the business aspect of it, the impact on the global economy. Still on the effect of coronavirus, Nigeria's stocks hit their lowest level in the year after declining by the most figure in 7 months in intraday trade as the country reported its first coronavirus case on Friday. The decline comes as crude oil threatens to break below $50 per barrel and tests both the Central Bank of Nigeria's ability to defend the naira and the country's revenue projections. The International Monetary Fund said it expects the Nigerian economy to grow just by 2% in 2020, down from 2.5% it previously projected. The decline comes as crude oil threatens to break below $50 per barrel and tests the ability of the central bank to defend the naira. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia is pushing to make a substantial cut in oil production when OPEC and its allies meet this week as global energy producers scramble to respond to the coronavirus outbreak that has crippled demand. Now, we've been talking about coronavirus and its direct impact on livelihood, on individuals, and how the Nigerian government is managing it. But the long-term effect is that it's likely to affect the Nigerian economy. When the budget was passed in December 2019, the expectation was that the benchmark will be $57 per barrel. Now with coronavirus, we caught in demand from China, which is a major, buyer of, crude oil. Everything has gone down. March 5, March 6, OPEC Plus is going to have a meeting. The expectation is that, the supply will also be further cut, just to protect the members of OPEC Plus. Stock markets all over the world, from Hong Kong to the US to UK, all the stock market is down. So Nigeria looks like, as a resource-based, commodity-dependent country, is in trouble. So, Prof, I'll start with you. How do we manage this?
Yeah, how do we manage it? You must understand what you are seeking to manage. You need to understand what the problem is. I quite agree with you that it has some economic, pillars to address. It is important to note the fundamental difference between Ebola as an epidemic, as a pandemic, and the coronavirus, in order to appreciate the challenge and then discuss the economic implications. In this case, Ebola as an epidemic, the infection, all right, is after the carrier had been infected. Now, people cannot be infected until the symptoms have been exposed. In the context of coronavirus, COVID-19, you do not need to wait for the symptoms to be exposed before infection. So many people carry coronavirus without showing, for instance, the symptoms. So the infection had already taken place. Now, how do you now link this one to the economic considerations? If, for instance, and like you did ask the question earlier on, whether we are fully and well prepared for this, and I was trying to say, well, in the long run, you cannot. If there are carriers of coronavirus and the symptoms are not readily shown, how do you prevent, how do you manage that type of situation? Someone is sick, but the evidence, the symptoms are not immediately shown. That will be very, very difficult. Meaning now that in terms of long-term management of that type of crisis, there must be a permanent, structure, mechanism to predict, to foresee, and prepare well in advance. In this type of case, for instance, we have been given a report that domestic dogs, cats, cannot be infected by coronavirus. Now, why is it, since you're asking for how to manage this type of situation, why is it that at the regional level, at the West African regional level, there is no cooperation to investigate the immunity that the domestic dogs, the cats do have? Why is it that they cannot easily be infected by coronavirus? That is one way. And then, in terms of preparing for the future, the Chinese themselves have come up with their own vaccine. And in a letter or in an article published by the Chinese ambassador to Nigeria, Dr. Pinjian, explaining that, look, the Chinese people will appreciate understanding, friendship of everyone, because that one will last longer. Looking for suggestions, opinions of people, particularly the Nigerian view in this particular case. I think it would be good, especially for the media professionals in Nigeria. I can confidently mention, give the challenge to Enough is Enough, to say, look, enough is enough to come up with the whole team to seek a collaborative understanding with the Embassy of China and see how the Chinese can explain to the Nigerian public what they are doing, what efforts they are making. Then Enough is Enough will translate that one into a plan of action in such a way now that since our relationship with Nigeria, with China is quite warm, and then begin to find the managerial...
Well, you are the person in charge of Enough is Enough Nigeria, right? And what we know is that many countries, scientists all over the world included, have been making efforts to get a vaccine. There's a race for it, either in Israel or Italy or the United States. Now, the stock market is affected, businesses are affected, the travel and tourism industry is affected, everybody is afraid. The whole of UK, the United Kingdom, is in a panic mode. Should people panic? Or do you think that this is more work for scientists and that the scientists should work faster to save humanity?
Yeah, excuse me, panicking doesn't help anyone, really.
Is that?
I said panicking doesn't help anything, doesn't take away the virus or make things better. But I think for countries and for organizations, information is extremely important in just letting people understand what is happening. I think response could really have been said to be slow. I mean, quite a number of tweets that I saw were saying that people who landed in the UK, that nobody asked them where they were coming from, literally. But I mean, I'm sure there's a pattern to know where flights are landing from, but the fact that I landed from a country doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only place I went to. So they thought that was quite interesting that that wasn't being asked. I think the whole sort of connection, Italy becoming a hotspot and everybody that's then flown from Italy or coming from Italy infecting, I think for Iran and maybe Egypt, the people that brought it in were coming from Italy as well. So yeah, it is where we're at. There's money chasing scientists who think they might have a clue. I think there was a news report that some scientists in Israel might be close to, they're still testing on animals. But yes, there's a place for scientists, there's a place for information, there's a place for self-awareness enough to know where you've been, who you might have been in contact with, and ensuring that you regulate yourself accordingly. But I think maybe at the back of some people's minds is what the numbers speak to, and that was your earlier point, that the common flu kills more people per year than what we've seen with coronavirus. But as a virus, its mode of transmission and its effects are a lot deadlier. A flu is a flu. But the effects of this and the need for you to, all the sort of special medical care that's needed to contain coronavirus as opposed to the flu makes it a lot more expensive.
But Chike, do we need to do more? Like, for example, stop people coming from China or Italy from entering Nigeria.
Or large crowds gathering.
Or from Europe, you know, for a while. Just say these people must not come to Nigeria.
That would be extreme, because already the world economy is in trouble. And that speaks to what your earlier question was all about. I mean, there's decreased economic activities, factories are closing down, you know, and that is why OPEC has to step down their production, which is now affecting us. You can see the domino effect in everything. So as much as there's this economic loss, which is going worldwide, you know, I think the world just has to be astute in trying to manage this pandemic. Trying to close borders is not going to be the solution now at all. Like Yemi said, I think what is more important is putting protocols in place where you can trace people, where people are, when you come into any border, any country, the border of any country, you are asked, where are you coming from? Where have you been maybe in the last whatever weeks, you know? And then those protocols to monitor your health as of that time, because like Prof said, there's the danger that you come in, you're fine, and then later on something will develop. But that is where we are. And who says in another 2-3 years, another deadlier virus will not come in? I guess this is what we have to deal with in life right now.
Yeah, you cannot be more correct. The entire world is at risk. But we'll take a short break now on Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, I have Professor Bola Akintanewa, Director General, Polytech Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Chike Ogia, former Commissioner of Information Delta State, and Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Now, we take another subject, the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's decision in the Bayelsa State gubernatorial election case. Nigeria's Supreme Court has dismissed an application seeking a review of the ruling which removed ex-Bayelsa governor-elect David Lyon and his running mate for lacking in merit. The Supreme Court fined lawyers representing David Lyon and the All Progressives Congress in the application for review of the Apex Court judgment on Bayelsa gubernatorial election. Chief BABALOLA represented Mr. Lyon, while Chief Wole Olanipekun represented the All Progressives Congress. While delivering judgment in the application filed by the party and the candidates, Justice Amina Ogi, who had tears in her eyes, said she regretted that very senior lawyers were responsible for filing the applications. The Supreme Court justices ruled that each of the lawyers must pay 10 million naira to each of the 3 respondents, the People's Democratic Party, Governor Doye Diri, and the Deputy Governor of Bayelsa State, Lawrence Ewuru Japo, bringing the total amount to be paid to 60 million naira. Bayelsa State Governor Doye Diri described the Supreme Court ruling as an affirmation of God's judgment, which paved the way for him to emerge victorious. Well, that's precisely what happened at the Supreme Court. And now this has provided a basis for expectations for the March 2nd, that's tomorrow, sitting and ruling of the Supreme Court on the case of Imo State. Well, we assume that every case will be judged on its own merit. But what we have seen in the case of Bayelsa State, their lordships were very stern, they were very vigorous. They accused the counsel of the APC, for bringing, and the candidates, for bringing a case that was vexatious, regrettable, frivolous and unacceptable before the court. I think one point they made is that every lawyer is an officer in the temple of justice, and that no lawyer at all, must be allowed to waste the time of the court. So we see the Apex Court asserting itself. Are we likely to see this also playing out in the Imo case? And what do we think of the position taken by their lordships in the Bayelsa case? Because they did their very best, their very possible best, to protect the integrity of the Apex Court, which they say is final, for all ages, as Justice Amina Ogi pointed out. I'll start with you, Chike.
Yeah, as the court pleases, as we say.
as their lordships please.
Yeah,
please,
but
yes.
the truth is there were a lot of salient issues that were settled with that case, a lot. You see, let's start from the beginning. Every jurist, everybody starts in our profession as a young lawyer. And we all have those older lawyers we look up to. Some of them, Rotimi Williams, who was the doyen of the Nigerian bar, never went to the bench. Many of them, if an Olanipekun or a professor Babalola wanted to go to the bench, they most likely have retired God knows how many years ago, So for a younger Amina Ogi, who obviously was looking up to these distinguished lawyers.
These are icons.
These are icons, exactly. And for her to feel so pained that they are bringing those kind of vexatious and frivolous petitions to the final court. I think that was what was the cause of her temperamental.
Although every man can have his day in court.
But the
We
truth,
should remember that.
the truth is this, like I said again, the finality of the Supreme Court, so that we don't open a floodgate for litigation. And that's why they said
There must be an end
there must
to
be an end to
litigation.
litigation. That principle was also reestablished there. Then they also, went out to explain to us that there are three times, or there are three, on three occasions the Supreme Court can review, because it can never overrule itself. We must understand that. But it can review its decision. One, has there been a clerical error? We have to look at that. Two, has there been maybe a misrepresentation of facts? Have they used the wrong law to look at the issue and decide?
Whether or not the Supreme Court arrived at its ruling.
Per incuriam. Exactly. Okay, that's true. You're a lawyer, I keep forgetting. So that is also the second one. And that's why I tell people that, yes, they have come down heavily on this judgment, which to my mind is the right thing to do, because like we said, the finality of that court must be established and protected at all times. But we must also be careful to separate the Imo State from this, because like you rightly said, all the cases would be reviewed on its own judgment, on its own merit. And in the case of Imo State, where you're having a situation where the registered voters are now less than the amount of the votes that were counted, then you begin to know that that is really an issue. That definitely must go to an issue. But obviously, I don't want to, it is sub judice, like you rightly said. We await the judgment tomorrow, and I cannot prejudge the court at this time. But I'm just trying to raise these salient points that those are the things that the courts look at. But basically, this is good for Nigerian jurisprudence, and I think it's the right thing to do.
Well, everybody in Nigeria now is a lawyer.
A lawyer.
Some of them bathroom lawyers. In fact, most of them are bathroom lawyers.
But they're still lawyers.
Well, everybody is quoting the law. Yeah, but what do you think of the aftermath? The people in Bayelsa State, both parties have behaved like gentlemen. We have not had any disruption. Even the governor himself went forward to say, well, this is God's judgment, and it's a miracle judgment, and that he will run an all-inclusive government. Do you think that the stakeholders have behaved well?
I think the stakeholders at the sort of top level, but people in Bayelsa do feel cheated, because as we said last week, this case is a pre-election matter. So there shouldn't have been a case where APC went into an election without a candidate for us to have gotten to where we have gotten. However, I think one of the things the thing that baffles me about the Supreme Court is saying that the Supreme Court judgment is final, except. So it's almost sort of harping on the fact that we can't reverse ourselves, but we can reverse ourselves on these conditions, which I just think is a bit silly, if I want to use that word. But I do understand that cases have to end, but I think it does a disservice to say that we can't go back. So it's not saying reverse yourself. I think a better way to maybe phrase it is to set aside that judgment. And I just want to read this really quickly, which I thought was very interesting. As you said, everybody's now a lawyer. From a lawyer,
including present company.
Exactly. From a lawyer, this was sent around in Supreme Court, held inter alia, that the Supreme Court has the power to set aside its judgment and rehearse same under the following circumstances: where there's a clerical mistake in the judgment or order, where there's an error arising from an accidental slip or omission, where there arises the necessity for carrying out its own meaning and to make its intention plain, where any of the parties obtained judgment by fraud or deceit, where such a decision is a nullity, where it is obvious that the court was misled into giving the decision under a wrong belief that the parties consented to it, when the judgment was given without jurisdiction, where the procedure adopted was such as to... The murkiness of saying that we can't reverse ourselves, but also say, but the law says you can set aside your judgment, which then means if there were errors, you could get to a point where you invariably reverse yourself. So I for me, think that's very interesting.
Yeah, except that, in all cases, it's the court itself that has the jurisdiction to reverse itself or to assert itself.
Yes,
and what their lordships have done in this case is to assert themselves and say, look, our judgment is final for all ages.
No, that's what I'm trying to say. On
Because
this particular
on
matter,
that rests the trust and the confidence that the people have in the apex court.
I'm not disputing what they're saying about the Bayelsa case. I'm disputing what they're implying for the larger role of the Supreme Court. And that, for me, that's the distinction. So you're right. They have the right to say, on this particular matter, our final judgment is, and we're not. And I think, to your point, it is quite interesting and also unfortunate that people of the caliber of Chief Afe Babalola at almost 90, I think he's 90, is being fined by a court for wasting the time.
To send a signal to other officers in the Temple of Justice.
Indeed.
But as we hope, will be determined on its merit. Right. Prof, what's your take?
I salute the courage of Chief Afe Babalola and Chief Wole Olanipekun. And I also do commend the decision of the Supreme Court itself.
You are sitting on the fence. You are not taking a position.
Yeah, I will give you the explanations. I'm not sitting on the fence. You see, under normal circumstances, a changing society, any given stratum of society in this current world of globalization must always address, changes that will bring about, peace, orderliness, security in the world. Why I salute the courage of the Olanipekuns and the Babalolas is this. They are now coming to challenge laws they know very well. If anybody is coming out to suggest that an Afe Babalola, a Wole Olanipekun, does not know that, look, you cannot just come and challenge the ruling of the court. If, for instance, Babalola and Olanipekun were asked that, look, you will pay a fine, so something, and they readily say they are ready to pay. They are not running away. They are not frightened. That means that they really had one intention, which had not been explained. Now, what is happening is that if, for instance, the court had accepted their plea, the application...
Well, Prof, we need to go on break now. Sorry to interrupt you. We'll take a short break now. When we return, Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show, we continue. Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in our Lagos studio, I have Professor Bola Akintenewa, Director General, Bulitac Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Chike Ogea, former Commissioner of Information, Delta State, and Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Now, before we went on break, Prof, you were commenting on the Supreme Court ruling in the Bayelsa State gubernatorial case. If you could just conclude that before we take the next topic.
I've given reasons as to why Olanipekun Babalola, all right, have done well.
You praise them for their courage.
For their courage. Because if the applications had been taken by the court, the likelihood of having a new law, new thinking, would have emerged. Because they wouldn't have deliberately filed applications knowing fully well that, look, the Supreme Court has the finality of decisions. But if the two giants, the two titans, said they can pay 10 million each to the three respondents, totaling 60 million, it's not a joke. So there is an intended, objective that had not been clearly defined, and opportunity was not given to it. Now the court itself, if I'm commending it, is in light of just one consideration, which Chike drew attention to. You explain it, which is that, look, you cannot continue just appealing, filing applications. The court said that even if the application had been granted, there is nothing to suggest that in the future, the other stakeholders will not come back and be coming up with different excuses again. And there will never be an end to this. Now, it decided to assert its authority that this is final. So in this case, they are telling the people of Nigeria that justice at the end of the day is not necessarily as determined by the law court. The issue now is that I look at the position of the Supreme Court from a political perspective, all right? It's seeking self-justification, self-protection. They do not, the justices, they do not want to be bastardized. They do not want their image tainted. They still want the people to have confidence in the court. So this is why I think that, as it is, the decision is a compromise between the applicants, BABALOLA and Olanipekun, and the court.
Well, in any case, Prof, the law is what the lawmaker says it is, and lordships have lawmaking powers, right?
That's right.
Legal positivism,
That's
as
right.
we were taught. But in any case, it's important to test the law and to protect the integrity of the apex court. That's what they've established. We'll see what they decide in the Imo case and how that contributes to our jurisprudence.
That's right.
Let's take another subject. Still in Nigeria, the House of Representatives has resolved to investigate the slow pace of the rehabilitation and expansion works on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, the Abuja-Kaduna-Zaria-Kano Road, and the second Niger Bridge. Those to be investigated include the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing, the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority, Lagos-Ibadan, and other contractors engaged for the projects. This resolution followed the unanimous adoption of a motion moved by Ifeanyi Moma at the plenary on Thursday. The House subsequently mandated its Committee of Works to determine if the contractors have the capacity to deliver the contracts awarded as scheduled. The committee is to report back to the House within 4 weeks. Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, second Niger Bridge, Abuja-Kano Road, all these are beginning to look like abandoned projects.
Yeah.
What do you think, Chike?
And because I listened to that, the young man, the House of Rep, I think he's Abga, you know, Ifeanyi Moma. And basically what he was saying is that these three pieces of infrastructure has been chosen as priority infrastructure. And they are being funded by the National Sovereign Wealth Office.
Which has an infrastructure fund.
That's right. And of course, that fund is kept in dollars, or, you know, so there won't be, we have Naira, we have to change and all of that. So they are particular. And, but what I didn't really get was what the total amount that is needed. Let me zero in on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. Because from what he said, I think about 19 billion has been released, have been spent on that road. And we just see the road.
For the first phase.
Yes, but the first phase being done in snatches. And we all live in Lagos. The other day I had cause to leave Lagos for something quickly in Agoy way, you know, a couple of days ago.
Your in-laws?
Yes.
You went to visit your in-laws?
No, I think my father-in-law was actually 90, and you know, we went to church there. And we spent practically the whole day on the road. And it's still one problem or the other on that expressway. Now, the same thing. And then the man also speaks to, is there not even a conflict of interest, giving all these things to Julius Berger? Because he says they are doing the actual infrastructure.
No, the Lagos-Shagamu end is
Yes.
Julius Berger.
Yes.
The Ibadan end
Yes.
is CCC, I think.
Okay, fine. But he's talking about the other ones, like the...
Julius Berger has stakes in the other ones
as well. And that, like the Asaba one, the Asaba end of it.
The second Niger Bridge.
The second Niger
That
Bridge.
one has been abandoned.
Yes, you know, and that Julius Berger has to maybe take care of the houses that will be also demolished and all of that, aside from the actual construction of the road and all of that, I mean, of the bridge. So you see, you know, and then don't forget again, Abacha loot, some of these monies that they have recovered that was said to have been kept by Abacha, that's coming from everywhere now, is also being put into those infrastructure. And we are saying these things are not showing any signs of timely progress. And it is a worry, because whether we like it or not, every administration has a shelf life. And what if, you know, now, in the next 2 years is when we need real urgent action for these jobs to be completed, if we are looking at them to be completed
what is enough
in this cycle.
What is enough? You are the Director General of Enough is Enough.
On social media, the President's office has been sharing updates on the second Niger bridge. So I'm not quite sure about it being abandoned. I don't remember the updates off the top of my head, but it seems that work is going on. But that part of the work will not be seen to the eye either because you are going down into the water or whatever it is that you're doing. But Lagos-Ibadan, which I'm quite familiar with, I think for me, even part of the challenge with the roads is our design. So what for me would make sense for Lagos-Ibadan is to put a rail track through the middle of that road.
Well, yeah, they're doing that.
No, they're not, as far as I know.
No, there's something about rail transportation. Within
that's
that
part of that design, well, not that I'm aware of. But part of the biggest challenges that at least those who use the roads have is just communication. It would be, I'm not quite sure how we've been building this road now for, I don't know, over 10 years. And we still haven't found a way to let people know what parts of the road are open, what parts of the road are closed, have enough people on the road directing traffic, ensuring that people don't make it more difficult than it needs to be because they're not being patient. Those minor things. So he's spoken to the money bit of it. I'm speaking more to the human experience of it, that you can be constructing a road under difficult circumstances. Yes, we understand that. But you can also make the process easier by providing information, updates, so people also
and
understand.
And it's a major artery.
Artery, exactly.
Linking the west to the north, the west to the east. Yeah, Prof, last word on this in 30 seconds.
We cannot be preaching the gospel of anti-corruption while at the same time engaging in it. In this particular case, the point was made that Julius Berger is being given monopoly, priority of monopoly, is engaged in the 3 main projects. The second point is that, look, the total budget put for this one is 206 billion. But the BPP recommended 118 billion. Why is it given at the rate of 206 billion? All these phases, you know, Niger Bridge has 2 phases, A and B.
On that note, Prof, we've got to go. You've been watching Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abachi. For my entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now. And thank you very much for watching. See you next week. Thank you.